All right, we're talking this afternoon with Doc Renuart. He's incumbent House 17 member,
Yes.
running for re-election to something.
I'm ready for the House right now, yes.
Okay. Okay. We normally just start out, if you don't mind, if you can just tell us who you are and why you're here.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Well, I'm State Representative Doc Renuart, and I represent District 17, which is almost all of St. Johns County. And I've been in the legislature for the last 6 years. I'm currently the chairman of the Veterans and Military Affairs Subcommittee in the legislature. I'm also the chairman of the St. John's Legislative Delegation and the vice chairman of the First Coast Legislative Delegation, which involves all the counties throughout Northeast Florida. And my wife Tamara and I, we live in Ponte Vedra Beach. We have 7 adult children. We have 3 grandchildren, and we're hoping that we'll have some more soon. And I've been a combat veteran. I served 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan with the Florida Army National Guard, headquartered right here in St. Augustine. And I retired as a full colonel after 20 years of service. I'm a physician who's been in the same practice for the last 20 years, and I'm the past chief of staff of Baptist Medical Center Beaches. And in 2008, I first ran, and I ran on 3 major principles for less government, fewer taxes, and more individual responsibilities. And looking back over these last 6 years, that's just what I did. And nobody could have kind of predicted the recession and the downturn in the economy. And we actually faced $6.4 billion in revenue reductions during the first 4 budget years that I was there. But we didn't put that burden on the taxpayer. We actually were able to make some very significant cuts and very bold decisions. And because of that, Florida is stronger for it. And states like California, New York, New Jersey, they wish they were in Florida's position. And we have created over 642,000 private sector jobs just in the last 4 years. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates that we've had in many years. And we have the highest job growth rate of any of the large states in the Union. And this last year we had the largest budget in state history at $77.1 billion. And we didn't spend it all. We actually put $3.1 billion in reserves. And that helps our bond rating and lowers the interest rate on our taxpayers even further. And we had the largest education budget that we've ever had in the state of Florida at $20.7 billion, and that represents a 2.6% increase in per student funding from kindergarten through 12th grade education. We also were able to return another $500 million to the citizens and the residents of Florida in the way of reduced auto registration fees, prolonged tax-free holidays, and we have more business incentives to try and attract more business and industry to Florida to lower that unemployment rate further. And certainly we're trying to attract as much business and industry here to St. Johns County. And I've been very successful as a legislator, and I've passed some major pieces of legislation, including changing how we deal with concussion injuries in middle school and high school students. This year, as the chairman of the Veterans and Military Affairs Subcommittee, I authored the Florida GI Bill, which allows veterans, regardless of how long they've lived in Florida, to pay in-state tuition rates. It will be protecting and refurbishing our armories. It protects military families, and it's protecting our bases in the state of Florida from base realignment and closure. And I'm one of just 2 physicians in all the state legislature. And if you can imagine all the health care and patient care issues that come across our desks, often my opinion is very valued. And I'm hoping to be successful in my House race in November.
Let me ask you this. When I was trying to prepare to talk with you, and I started thinking, well, what do you really want to get accomplished in the House? My mind kept going to what are you going to get accomplished in the Senate? And I think where I'm coming from. I know what's going on, and I just want to know if you want to go and talk about that, because I'm sure it's something that comes up.
Okay.
All the time.
Right now I'm running for the House, and I have to run for re-election in November. Mm-hmm. And if the circumstances continue, it looks like Senator Thrasher will be resigning his Senate seat. That will allow for a special election. If there is a special election that I'm eligible for, I will be running for the Senate seat that continues to represent the area I represent in the House and areas of Flagler, Volusia, and Putnam County. The Senate has 3 times the amount of people that you represent, and obviously your vote and your views are stronger, and I think we can do a lot more for this area. And the challenge we're going to have is we're going to have a big change in our legislative delegation for this area, and we need to have that continuity and the leadership to protect our interest in Tallahassee when I go there to fight for you.
So, following up on that, it sounds like, you know, all things considered, you'll be probably in the Thrasher seat. Who would you recommend and who are you endorsing for the House seat?
Well, I've agreed not to support anybody at this time, but the type of person that we're looking for is somebody who can be a leader, that they'll be able to continue the fight that I've made in Tallahassee for the important things that we have, you know, protecting the St. Johns River, trying to attract more business and industry to our area, working with the airport, and certainly to keep our education programs at the top where they've been. And we're looking for somebody who will really be there and be the voice for the people of St. Johns County.
So is there a short list for that?
I'm sure there is.
You're just not aware of it?
I'm sure there is. I'll just leave it at that.
So, from your answer, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth at all, I'm just trying to make sure, is your sort of answer to this, is that whatever you were doing in the House, you can continue to do in the Senate, but supercharged,
With a bigger audience, yeah.
with more gas for a little bit, for a larger delegation.
Yeah,
I mean, for a larger, not that much.
That's
either, but yeah.
absolutely correct. Now, Senator Thrasher has some very large shoes to fill. I mean, he's very influential. He's been in legislative politics for 20-some years, you know, and we have some very strong issues for St. Johns County that are unique to us. We've had some of the highest growth rate, and when you have a growth rate that's greater than 4%, it's almost impossible to maintain the infrastructure. We've seen that as far as capital spending for our schools. We've been very fortunate in the budget to have some specialized funding for St. Johns County so that we could maintain some of that growth, even though it's still, if you talk to Superintendent Joe Joyner, that's still not enough. And we certainly understand that. But somebody in Miami, somebody in the Panhandle, somebody in Tampa is not going to understand our issues.
I'm going to go back a little bit too. Is there, should we do anything differently in the way that these laws are set up, where we don't end up with these? I mean, Vicki Oaks says our special election is going to cost about $330, and I guess it's different in Volusia because there's just that slice and all that stuff. But does this make sense to you the way it works, or is there any way that you would think as a legislator you'd want to change the process?
Well, you don't want a small group of people taking away your right to vote.
Which is the Republican Party.
It was one of the options where there was leaders from the Republican parties from different counties. And in certain situations that, that's the appropriate thing to get a Republican nominee to replace a vacancy. But even though it does cost to have a special election, letting the people have that voice, I think, is the best investment. If not, we could argue that every election, we could just phone it in or have somebody else make that decision for us. We're a democratic republic, but we have to vote that person in who's going to be representing us in the legislative bodies that we send our candidates to.
And of course, this way voters have a say. It really wouldn't be that much.
Yeah.
The other way.
Right.
On the other side, let me ask you, and I guess I keep wanting to ask you the Senate questions, but I'm sorry. But And it looks very much like, I mean, they say you'll be in the Senate, you'll be in a race.
Oh yeah,
in the Senate.
I'm sure I'll be
And
challenged.
and possibly with some Republicans as well. And I understand that some of the hierarchies and stuff there could be somebody trying to really get some people in against you as well, just because of the makeup of the Senate and the leadership in the Senate coming up. But I was talking with somebody today, and it was interesting. We were talking about you have a chance. Let's just say that you make the Senate. I'm sorry to just keep bringing this up, but it seems like more where you're going, but you will have a chance, which is I mean, you've moved through leadership in the House pretty quick, and I would assume that would happen in the Senate as well. But you have the chance to do 3 terms. You would like Jim King is the only time I recall that one.
Yeah, because the first term would not be a full
Because it's not full,
term.
and if you don't serve
Yeah.
full 8 years, you get a chance, and that's a huge boost. I mean, to be in the extra thing. So I'm just thinking it's something, because we brought the Senate thing up, and if talking about some negative things, that could be also a very powerful, positive thing in our district. I mean, just by the realities of politics, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's the person who gets elected, may have that opportunity because you're, by the state laws, there are term limits, and it's you're allowed 2 consecutive 4-year terms. And since it doesn't count if you have a piece of a term as your first term, it's going to be, total of 8 years consecutive.
So my next question is, so what do you think of term limits?
Well, there are values to term limits, and there's downsides too. The staff and the full-time personnel that are in Tallahassee, the staff for all the committees and for the different departments, they're sometimes there 20, 30 years. And that's where a lot of the institutional knowledge is kind of drifting to. And that's not really what the intention of term limits were for. It's so that you have, the citizen legislator, such as myself being a doctor. If there wasn't term limits, I probably wouldn't be here. But you want a cross-section of your community, and it's supposed to be part-time, even though it's pretty much a full-time position on top of your other full-time job. But 8 years is rather short, and looking back right now, I'm running for my final term for the Florida House, and gosh, it seems like I was sitting around this table just a couple years ago. It doesn't seem like it was a little more than 6 years ago. And I'm just getting to leadership. I think it took me 4 years before I really understood all the inner workings and how legislature was made, and who were the movers and the shakers and how to get things done. This last 2 sessions that I've had, I've passed 5 pieces of legislation each one of those years. Some of them were challenging and bringing groups together. Dr. Shirley from the Guana Reserve, Mike Shirley, he brought me a bill last year, and it was kind of unique in that the aquatic preserves, the state aquatic preserves, and there's 42 of them, were not eligible to have vendors on their property. State parks are, even though they fall under the same department. And that limits how people can use the Guana, because if you want to go kayaking, you've got to bring your kayak or arrange for a kayak. There's no bait and tackle shops. And we paired that up with another piece of legislation that actually streamlined some of the coastal permitting that the Department of Environmental Protection brought to me for things that wouldn't interrupt the turtles, would not affect nesting birds. And we were able to bring on board the Sierra Club, the Audubon, the turtle groups, all together. And we actually had one piece of legislation that we all could support. And that was a unique thing, to bring groups that oftentimes are not working together to pass something that everybody was happy with.
What's your position on Amendment 2?
As far as the legalization of marijuana, the way that it's written on the ballot is way too broad. And I am a practicing physician, and just to give you an example, I had a patient come into my office. It's been within the last year, and he said, Doc, okay, when marijuana is legal, are you going to prescribe it to me? And I'm looking at this guy's chart. This guy's healthy, and I said, well, what condition would you have that I should prescribe you marijuana for? He goes, well, when I run out of marijuana, I get very depressed, and the only thing that treats it is more marijuana.
Wow.
But if you look at the amendment, I would be under my right as a doctor to give him the permission slip to go get that. I mean, that's how silly this becomes. It is really the doorway for recreational use. We did pass a bill this last year that allows what's referred to as Charlotte's Web, which is a liquid concentrate made from plants that have very low THC and more of the CBC cannabinoid, which is an active ingredient that is able to interrupt seizures. There is limited data on this, but at least it was something that was effective, and we had a compassionate use plan. And that's how I see medical marijuana could have a use and maybe be studied further to see if we can expand the use of that. But putting it on our Constitution so broad with very few limits, I think is wrong. So I'm not in support.
What do you think of the constitutional amendment process? I mean, constitutional amendments as a whole. I mean,
Well, the Constitution is our document as citizens, and we have to respect it reverently. And a few years back, they changed the standards for getting amendments on the Constitution from a simple majority to 60%, which raised the bar higher. And the petition process is a challenge, but unfortunately, you can get paid prescription receivers or obtainers, and that people aren't even reading what they're signing for. And typically, when you get something on the ballot, if you make it sound favorably because you're limited by how many words you can have in that space, you're going to get a lot of people who don't understand it just to vote yes. We have to figure out a way that almost requires those who put the petition on there to really fund the education to the citizen of what they're voting on. And I don't know really how to do that. But we want to have informed voters. People have a right to change their document, our Constitution, but they should know why they're changing it.
is there too much of it going on?
Well, I mean, we only have, I think, 2 amendments this time. I mean, I think, what do we have, 11 amendments the time before last? So, I mean, it is a process. We have to have a process, to change the document. And if it looks like it's not being used the way it's supposed to, we might have to review that again in the legislature.
It's a lot harder to get them off and get them on.
Yeah, I mean, but we have done that too. Yeah, I think with the high-speed trains, that was a change that was made.
Okay.
Going forward, if in the House seat, in the House race, and potentially in the Senate, what would be your top 3 priorities, not necessarily in order, for St. Johns County?
Okay. Well, jobs and industry, still number 1. We're very good as far as a lower unemployment rate, but what we don't have is business and industry in St. Johns County. The county tax base is still heavily residential. I think it's 85-15, as far as a ratio. And when you see a downturn in real estate market, you saw what it did to our county's budget. And when everything's based on that, the ad valorem taxes, that's a challenge. Plus, we have the best school systems. I don't think anybody could argue anything differently. And my children have been educated in the St. Johns County schools, and what they don't have is jobs to come back to here. And I would like to see my grandchildren educated with the St. Johns County schools. So we got to have something to bring our kids back. We have all this intelligent workforce, so we need that level of technical jobs here. Now, airport, I think we're working pretty good there. I see that as a great growth area, but we need to look at other areas too. I think the US 1 corridor, it's prime for industrial growth. We got the rail right along there. We've got a good road system. We're not too far from I-95. The challenges we have is that those business and industry from out of state that want to move their headquarters and move their industry here, they're looking for shelled-in buildings already. They're looking for warehouse stuff. We don't have that here because we haven't. So we need to look at ways to attract that, maybe even ways to stimulate that to come to St. John's. We're still looking for expansion of our higher education here in St. John's too.
In what way?
I know that the county commission is looking at ways of having higher education such as graduate programs here in the county to be offered.
So economic growth would definitely be the number one.
Oh, number one, okay. And, well, of course, for us particularly, the 450th anniversary celebration, this is going to be our opportunity to showcase our area really to the world. And we want to make sure that we have the resources and infrastructures in place for that. We still have a lot of wonderful natural resources, the Guana, St. John's River, we've got our creeks. We want to make sure that we're protecting them appropriately. We've seen some improvement in St. John's River, but there's a long way to go. We also have our beaches. I know the County Commission, they've got a list of priorities. Some is the Summer Haven Creek, and that's one of the ones that I've been working with and meeting with citizens down there. We also have significant erosion in the South Ponte Vedra Beach area, and I've been working with a lot of citizens on those issues and trying to balance that appropriately with the environment and protecting our natural resources. Let's see, other issues. Again, it's maintaining that infrastructure based on that high growth rate that we have here in the county.
So you do see renourishment as an important part of our...
Yeah, and actually that bill, the coastal management bill that I passed on the last day of session, I think it was the second to last bill that got signed, one of the streamlining was actually for cities and counties if they want to do dune restoration. There's a lot less hurdles that they have to jump through. It's different than beach renourishment where you have to bring in the trucks and pump in the sand. This is something you can bring sand in and put it right on the dunes. And if you have a project like the Summer Haven Creek where you're actually removing fill, we'd have a place that we could put it and it would take less permitting to move that. And that actually helps turtle populations and helps the environment after a season.
What about rail? How do you feel about rail? I know as you mentioned earlier, that was an amendment that was reversed at one point. Mm-hmm. Do you think that that's an important part of Florida in the future?
Well, let's talk about Florida in the past. If it wasn't for the Florida East Coast Railroad, my family wouldn't be here. My family came to Florida at the turn of the century, just as Flagler laid the tracks down to Miami, and they started a lumber business down in Coral Gables. One of the challenges that we see with some of the light rail, like we have in Tri-Rail down between Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade, is it's a very expensive program to maintain. And while a passenger pays about $10 for a round trip, it's costing, I think it was somewhere around $1,100 for the capital and the operational costs per person that's using it. So, any infrastructure are going to have an investment. Mm-hmm. And the highways you don't get paid, for you having a highway, but that's a little extreme. And that's where I had some challenges when we had the Sunrail program across Central Florida. But you can't have passenger rail. It just has to be done in a smart way and get it where people are going to have a place to start and a place to end up. And when they get there, they're going to have some kind of transportation, such as rental cars or some other mode of transportation. You can't just go from spot to spot and expect people to go without their cars. Florida, because we don't have mountains, it's easy to traverse this state in a car. And people have gotten so used to cars because we don't have subways and we haven't had the rail, it's going to be very hard to take them away from the cars. For better movement of people and maybe better help in infrastructure and traffic might be some of the high-speed lanes, dedicated high-speed lanes where you might have a charge to use that priority lane And you'd still have the access to the standard lanes if you prefer. But if you want to move faster and take some of the traffic off the roads, that may be a better solution for a while.
Got one, at least for me, one last for you. Coming from your leadership role with the veterans, what do you think about this issue that's been going on down here with,
All right.
with the vets and Jerry and the county and with that?
Yeah, and I was the one who alerted the Florida Department of Veteran Affairs that we're even having this issue because they weren't even aware of that.
As of when?
That was about a month ago, at least there. But the state of Florida really doesn't have any oversight over the VA.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a federal program, but we want to make sure that our citizens' voices are heard and that the appropriate care is going to be available to them. Every so often I'll read and I'll hear that it sounds like we've got a solution, but then I hear somebody's pulling back or pulling away. We're still going to continue to watch this. I've had my assistant at the meetings that we've had at the Elks and hearing the reports from the VA, but it kind of brings up a concern that we've seen really around the nation that the VA is not really paying attention to the needs of the veteran. And it's disappointing. And as a veteran myself, we would like to see some of that attitude improve coming from the federal government. Not that there's much that the state can do. We have a lot of cooperation with the nursing homes. That's the one avenue that the State Department of Veteran Affairs cooperates with the federal VA. And we're working on getting a new nursing home in the state of Florida, most likely in the Panhandle, since we got ours not too long ago.
But the clinics are different.
The clinics are a different section,
Completely different.
but they're definitely a need that we have for the citizens of St. Johns County. It would not be appropriate for them to have to go out of the county for the care. And these are the people that have served us. It's time for us to step up and serve them.
Okay. Thank you. Do you guys have questions?
Anything else you want to tell us? We haven't asked.
We don't ask all the questions. So.
Well, I mean, this last year, I had, like I said, I was very successful. One of the bills that I passed was to keep e-cigarettes out of the hands of minors. And the federal government, the FDA, is still trying to come up with their legislation. They keep running into roadblocks and lawsuits. But at least here at the state of Florida, it will be illegal for minors to possess, to use, or to purchase, and be illegal for somebody to sell it to a minor. And certainly that's the start. I talked about the Guana bill. We talked about the Veterans bill. I've had some other favorable legislation where I allowed children with cystic fibrosis to have access to their medications in classrooms. And there's just legislation that I feel can help the people here in St. Johns County. We've also been very fortunate with state funding for some of our restoration projects. And this I've been very proud of, and working with the University of Florida and some of the archaeological improvements that we had. But the big victory this year has to go to the lighthouse and LAMP and some of our maritime research that we got funding for. And I think it really opens up the eye of the tourist, the citizen, about what life was like 300, 400 years ago. In my background, when I was at the University of Florida, even though I was doing pre-med, I still had some electives. I did the Florida Studies certificate program. It was like a minor in Florida history. Kind of did it because that was something I was interested in. I never thought I'd use it. And here I am representing ground zero for Florida history right here in St. Augustine. So for me, it's always unique to participate in that. And then being here, certainly during the time where we're going to celebrate our big 450th anniversary, I think that's going to be unique.
It is. Do you ever see the shows that Flagler College, the St. Augustine shows that they put out? I watched one just last night. It was about Chuck Mead and they do a 30-minute show. They do some really nice ones too.
Yeah, Chuck gave me a personal tour of the lighthouse and the programs they're doing, and it's amazing some of the cannons and stuff, and how they can do the reverse Or in some ways, yeah,
Electrolysis or
well, it's not
something.
electrolysis, but it's
They get the rust
yeah,
off.
yes, they get all the debris off of them, and the just like little buttons they found by the shipwrecks, and they were able to identify who was on the ship based by the military contingency, because their buttons actually showed what regiment they were in. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, he's a neat guy.
Mhm.
I guess there's no chance of getting any funding from Tallahassee for the 450. That's a little late
We,
for that, isn't
we
it?
actually did get some this last
Yeah.
year for the humanitarian council. I think it was through them. We did try to get some additional funds, but just because of limited funds, we were able to get that. By the time the budget comes out this
Late.
next year, it's going to be a little late for that. But there may be some other ways that the state can help, and certainly Department of State and their Viva Florida 500. That's still part. The 450 is still part of that move that we've had starting last year.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the audience for listening in, and I hope I can have their support November 4th as I run for the Florida House of Representatives. Thank you.
Fine job.
Right.